Living with my roommate Rachel was supposed to be fun. We were both excited about starting college and sharing an apartment together. But things took a dark turn soon after we moved in. At first, it was small things. Objects misplaced, strange noises in the night. I chalked it up to the stress of adjusting to our new environment. But then I started noticing changes in Rachel. She became withdrawn, spending hours locked in her room, refusing to talk to me or even make eye contact. One night, I woke up to the sound of chanting coming from Rachel's room. It was low and guttural, sending shivers down my spine. I crept to her door and pressed my ear against it, trying to make out the words. They sounded like an ancient language filled with malice and darkness. Terrified, I debated whether to knock or just run. Before I could decide, the chanting stopped abruptly, followed by a deafening silence. I hesitated for a moment before knocking softly on Rachel's door. "Rachel?" I called, my voice trembling. There was no response. I knocked again, louder this time. "Rachel, are you okay?" Still nothing. With trembling hands, I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open slowly. What I saw made my blood run cold. Rachel was sitting in the center of the room, surrounded by candles. Her eyes were glazed over and her mouth was moving silently, as if she was speaking to someone, or something, that only she could see. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge my presence. That's when I noticed it. The darkness swirling around her, a shadowy figure lurking just beyond the edge of the candlelight. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but something held me in place, rooted to the spot as I watched in horror. Suddenly, Rachel's eyes snapped open and she turned to look at me. But it wasn't Rachel looking back at me. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent. "Run!" it hissed, its voice echoing in my mind. "Before it's too late." And without another word, I turned and fled, knowing that whatever had taken hold of Rachel was beyond my understanding and beyond my ability to fight. Living with my roommate, Jacob, was like living with a stranger. He was quiet and reserved, spending most of his time locked away in his room, working on who knows what. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured he was just introverted, like many of the other students on campus. But then I started noticing strange symbols carved into the walls, symbols I couldn't identify, but that filled me with a sense of unease. One night, curiosity got the better of me and I decided to investigate. I waited until Jacob was out before sneaking into his room, careful not to make a sound. What I found there chilled me to the bone. The walls were covered in intricate patterns, drawn in what looked like blood. Candles flickered in the corners of the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And in the center of it all was Jacob, kneeling on the floor, his eyes closed in concentration. I watched in horror as he began to chant, his voice low and guttural. The air seemed to thicken around me, suffocating me with its darkness. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but something held me in place, rooted to the spot as I watched Jacob's ritual unfold. Suddenly, he stopped chanting and opened his eyes, staring directly at me with a look of pure hatred. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. And then, before I could react, he lunged at me, his hands outstretched and claw-like. I stumbled backward, tripping over something on the floor. When I looked down, I saw it. A small, wooden box, its lid open to reveal a collection of ancient-looking artifacts. And that's when I realized the truth about Jacob. He wasn't just performing some harmless ritual. He was summoning something dark and dangerous, something that should never have been brought into our world. With a newfound sense of urgency, I scrambled to my feet and ran, knowing that if I didn't escape now, I might never get another chance. Living with my roommate Emma was like living in a nightmare. She was sweet and kind on the surface, but I could sense something dark lurking beneath her cheerful exterior. At first, I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. But then I started noticing things. Strange symbols hidden in her artwork, cryptic messages scrawled on the walls when she thought I wasn't looking. I knew I had to confront her, to find out what she was hiding. So one night, when she was out, I searched her room, desperate for answers. What I found there shook me to my core. Hidden beneath her bed was a wooden chest, its lid sealed shut with heavy chains. Curiosity got the better of me, and I broke the chains, eager to uncover the secrets within. What I found inside was beyond anything I could have imagined, a collection of ancient artifacts, each more sinister than the last. There were books bound in human skin, jars filled with strange liquids, and a dagger with a blade that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But the most terrifying thing of all was the journal, filled with Emma's handwriting detailing her descent into madness. She wrote about rituals performed in the dead of night, sacrifices made in the name of dark gods, and the voices that whispered to her in the darkness, urging her to commit unspeakable acts. I wanted to run, to get as far away from Emma as possible. But something held me in place, a voice in the back of my mind urging me to stay, to confront her and put an end to whatever madness had taken hold of her. And so, with trembling hands, I closed the chest and waited for Emma to return, knowing that whatever happened next would change both of our lives forever. Living with my roommate Lily was like living in a silent movie. She hardly ever spoke, preferring to communicate through gestures and the occasional note slipped under my door. At first, I thought she was just shy, but as time went on, I began to suspect something darker was at play. There was a sadness in her eyes, a haunted look that spoke of deep-seated trauma. One night, I woke to the sound of whispers coming from Lily's room. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard my name spoken in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. Terrified, I crept to Lily's door and pressed my ear against it, straining to make out the words. They were low and guttural, filled with anger and resentment. I wanted to run, to escape before whatever was in there noticed me. But something held me in place, a morbid curiosity urging me to stay and listen. And that's when I heard it. The sound of something moving in the darkness, something with heavy footsteps and a labored breathing. I didn't wait to find out what it was. With a cry of terror, I turned and fled, knowing that whatever Lily was hiding was far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. Living with my roommate Sarah was like living with a puppeteer. She pulled the strings, controlling every aspect of my life without me even realizing it. At first, it was subtle, small changes in my routine, little things out of place that I couldn't quite explain. But then it escalated until I felt like I was nothing more than a marionette dancing to Sarah's tune. I tried to confront her about it, to demand answers. But every time I brought it up, she just smiled that sweet, innocent smile of hers and told me I was imagining things. I knew better though. I knew there was something dark lurking beneath Sarah's facade, something that wanted to control me, to use me for its own twisted purposes. One night, I woke to find Sarah standing over my bed, her eyes glazed over and empty. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge my presence. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes, as if she were waiting for something. And that's when I saw it, the shadowy figure lurking just behind her, its tendrils reaching out to envelop me in darkness. I wanted to scream, to fight back against whatever was happening. But something held me in place, paralyzed with fear as I watched Sarah's transformation unfold before my eyes. And then, with a voice that wasn't her own, she spoke. "Welcome to my world," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "I've been waiting for you."